Hey guys, it's Eric, owner of Farpoint Farms, and tonight I wanted to show you what is one of my prized possessions, and that is this Ward's Airline. I don't know the exact model number to it, but it is a beautifully restored 1938 AM and shortwave radio, and it's completely functional. Matter of fact, I've got it turned on right now, and the tubes are warming up. As you can see, it was well cared for probably its whole life. At some point, like all tube radios, the capacitors or tube failed on it, and so it probably got pushed into the corner, obviously replaced by newer and greater technologies like television. So the good news is it wasn't kept in a basement where the veneer would get all buckled from moisture, and it wasn't kept on the porch where it would have just been ruined. It was kept somewhere inside somebody's house, probably as a decorative piece. And then somebody realized what they had and decided to fix it up. And so they refinished the outside. It's got a new coat of stain on it. But again, the veneer is all original. And then they took it to a professional radio restoration shop, and they replaced the tube that wasn't working, and then did what's called recapping. And that's to take the old capacitors, which were large and leaky and no good, and replace that and the wiring with modern wiring. So you end up with a radio that's functional and should be functional for another 30 years, give or take. I've had it for 15 years, and it works really well depending on weather conditions. Obviously, when you're talking about old radios and when you're talking about shortwave radio in particular, weather conditions do tend to make a difference. This radio, I'm not going to play on AM, although it does work extremely well. If you're familiar with clear channel AM radio, that's the 50,000 watt radio stations that are all over the United States. Here's a close-up zoomed picture of this beautiful silk screen that's here. But you can see the call signs for all the original clear channel radio stations in America, and that's really amazing. So they're there, and of course on a beautiful night, you can hear stations from all around the country quite well on this, which is probably where the majority of its life was spent listening. Now it also has shortwave, and of course some of these have changed, but it has markings here for amateur bands, police bands, ship bands. Those bands have shifted around some, but the shortwave does still work, and that's what we'll play with tonight. I'll get it turned on here and warmed up and loud, and we'll go through and you can hear some foreign and domestic radio stations playing. And I'm talking a variety. There's your BBC News. You have a lot of English-speaking foreign news channels, which can be kind of interesting to listen to. You also have a lot of foreign-speaking foreign news channels, which are interesting to listen to. There's also a lot of English-speaking religious channels on shortwave. Shortwave, I'll get into in another video, but it's really kind of fun to play with. It is, every year it gets a little less and less as more people move to different technologies, but there's still a lot of cool stuff to be found on shortwave. It's dependent on weather and temperature and stuff like that, so we'll see what we got tonight. But let's go ahead and go through the knobs. Now, all this is original. Everything here on the radio is original. The only damaged piece on it since the restoration was done by my cats here. They damaged the original cloth here a little bit, which is unfortunate. But other than that, I'd say it's a 9 out of 10. And we have our 4 knobs here. This is your on-off switch and your volume control. I'll turn that up so you can hear the static in the background. This dial here controls the dial on the radio itself. And this is your band selector dial. You have your AM, shortwave 1 and shortwave 2. And then this one is a tone control. So all four of them work and function as they should. Now again, I'll show you a close-up of this. This little green dot you see in the middle of this screen, that's called a tuning eye. And that was probably one of the earliest gadgets you could find on a radio. And it works to some extent. It's, like I said, it's kind of a marketing gimmick, I'd imagine, but it does work. As you get closer to a signal, the tuning eye narrows its gap, and if you have a real strong signal, there's no gap at all, hardly, where if you're picking up a faint signal, the tuning eye is pretty well spread out. But it does work, so it's pretty neat. I'm going to move the camera closer. We'll roll through some of the channels, and I'll show you it going through the dials. And then I'll unplug the unit, and I'll turn it around so you can see the back of it. And hopefully you'll get a kick out of this, because this is something that I've had, like I said, for about 15 years. Bought it from an elderly gentleman who was dying of cancer, unfortunately, and he wanted to make sure that it got passed on to somebody who could appreciate something as beautiful and as functional as this. And I was that guy, thankfully. So let's get the camera closer and we'll take a look. Okay, I'll turn it up a little bit. Now I'm on the high end of the shortwave band, and we'll just start rolling through and see what we come across, okay? One thing to keep in mind, because the bands are so spread out here, in the more modern era, channel spacing is much more narrow and channel selection is much more narrow. So you really have to be fine-tuned with this. It's fairly easy to roll right over stations that are playing. Sounds like a possible South American signal coming through. There's a fairly strong one. If memory serves, I believe that is French. We won't stay on that song too long for copyright reasons. It's sad that that's what the world has come to, but that is what the world has come to. There's an English-speaking station there. Now, I don't know if the tuning eye is showing up when these stations come into focus, but tell you what I'll do, I'll get the camera even closer. Okay. Yeah, that's the tuning eye there, and then you can see all the different clear channels listed. Pretty amazing. Sounds like an English-speaking religious station.
Then one of the lawyers answered and said to him, "Teacher, by saying these things, you reproach us also." And he said, "Us." An extremely pious life. I mean, you know, he went through millions and millions and millions of dollars. Going to attack the Reichenberg Canadian community. If Reichenberg turns, it might not last.
Sounds like another religious station. Now, sometimes you will pick up ham transmissions. A lot of stuff in ham now is in sideband, so it'll just sound like muffled voices. But occasionally you'll get something on regular AM mode, and you'll pick it up quite clearly on this. Okay, so let me go ahead and turn it off, and I'll go ahead and unplug it. I'll turn the radio around so you can see the tubes, and that'll wrap up this beautiful little radio review. Okay, so I don't want to touch anything because I'll get fried here, but that would be your tuning eye. You have your tubes here. The chassis itself was probably used in several different models, and those underneath here is where all the new wiring and the new capacitors are. But the tubes are mostly original. I think, as I recall, he told me one of the tubes had to be replaced, obviously with new old stock. He also restrung the tuning dial itself, and the rest of it is original. So what you're looking at dates back a very long time. The original speaker is still installed here. What sadly is missing, it's one of the reasons that I'm not getting a lot of signals tonight, is the long wire antenna, and that would have been a spool of wiring that would have been wrapped around this whole bottom area, and I'll scan down here a little bit. So inside of here, there would have been a large bundle of wiring, and that's the long wire antenna is the best way to pick up AM and shortwave radio signals. Unfortunately, that is gone. So he has this little piece of copper wire that he put in here that works fine if you live. When I lived in the Raleigh area, I could pick up 680 WPTF is the big clear channel there, no problem with this little antenna here, and some other smaller stations that were close by. But right now I'm 40 minutes from the nearest 5,000 watt AM station, so I don't have any access to local AM, only clear wire or clear channel AM stations would come in, and so you have to pretty much wait till after dark, and then you also have to use a long wire. So what he did was he had this clip here. It's just an alligator clip, and I hooked that to the external long wire antenna that I have in the house. Unfortunately, right now it's not installed. I had to take it down because it needed some work. This other wire here is a grounding wire. If you're getting a lot of interference from signals in your house, you know, like, let's see, what am I thinking here? You know, not antenna, like TV interference, lighting interference, stuff like that. You would ground this chassis, and that would help your reception. So that's what those two wires are for. And that's it. Let me take the camera off the tripod. There is a sticker inside of here I'll show you, and that'll wrap it up. So that's going to wrap up my review of the Montgomery Ward Airline Radio. And again, 1938, not many things, electronic or not electronic, that are surviving from 1938. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions about this radio or its functions, feel free to leave a comment and I will get back to you. And it does work a lot better than the little demonstrational video I did tonight. It's just between not having the big wire on the house and having a snowstorm rolling in, Shortwave's not working too well tonight, but that's okay. I'm Eric, owner of Farpoint Farms. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, perhaps you'll think about liking and subscribing. I'll see you next time. Take care.